All right, and welcome back. Scott Godwin, scottgodwin.net. And in this video, we're going to talk about stress again. Now, stress is important because we talked about this in the first video. If you get that stress thermostat too high or too low, if you get out of balance, it affects your health. It affects your health because your hormones get out of whack. You feel a sense of overwhelm. You feel as though you can't handle the situation. Stress is relative, though. Stress is relative. What's stressful to you may not be stressful to me, and vice versa. You know, public speaking for you might be overwhelming. If you have to, work in a social environment, that may be overwhelming for you. Whatever it is, it's relative, okay? Some people can handle more than others because some people have more resources, more ability to deal with stress. Now, what I want to talk about in this video is a little bit more about what stress is really all about when we boil it down to its simplest idea. And then also I want to give you some tips on things you can do to manage stress. So, what we need to think about when we're talking about stress is essentially control. Okay, do you feel like you have any control over the situation? Now, sometimes you don't. When we looked in the previous video at some of the most stressful events or things to happen in someone's life, one of those things was physical illness or injury, and you can't do anything about that. You don't have any control over it. Well, you don't think you do, but there's always ways to improve the situation. There might be certain things you just have to accept, but there's always ways to improve the situation. So stress is really about control. It's about coping. It's about who you are as a person. Are you a strong person? Do you have the resources? Do you have the healthy habits in place, physically, mentally, spiritually? Let's go back to the marriage example. If you happen to be going through a tough marriage or a divorce or something like that, or the death of a spouse, heaven forbid, you want to have those resources you can draw on. Okay, you want to have that healthy lifestyle. You want to be physically fit. You want to have that healthy diet. You want to be living a healthy lifestyle involved in wellness activities and just be a positive person, someone who's doing good things. So 3 rules to remember for stress management. 3 rules are to, number 1, do things that are good for you, do things that are good for other people, do things that are good for the community. That's the first rule, okay? Good for you, good for other people, and good for the community that you live in. Okay, that's the first rule. Number 2, I want you to avoid negative stress, okay? Avoid negative stress. What does that mean? We'll talk a little bit more about it in just a few minutes, but it means avoiding too much media, avoiding, movies and films that might stress you out, avoiding long commutes if you can help it, avoiding overcommitting to too many things, avoiding negative, unhealthy habits like smoking and junk food. So you're going to avoid negative stress, but you're also going to do things to build resiliency, to build the ability to cope. So 3 rules. Do things that are good for you, good for other people, and good for the community. Number 2, avoid negative stress. And number 3, build up your resiliency to stress. I'm going to tell you a little bit more specifically about how to do that. But the number 1 most important thing to remember is that when you have chronic day in and day out stress that you're not managing very well, whether it's relationship problems, road rage, too much media, too much technology, not enough relaxation, not enough physical activity, not enough sleep, too much caffeine, all of these things add up. And what do? Let's go back to the first video just to give you a refresher. All of those things combine to boost that stress hormone called cortisol. And if you do that on a chronic basis, a long-term basis, your nervous system and your hormones get out of balance. They get out of whack. that thermostat that we talked about in the first video, that stress thermostat, it gets out of whack. And if you get that out of balance, then it has huge implications on your health. So we talked in the first stress video, but I want to remind you that the stress handbook that I recommend buying is called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers by Robert Sapolsky, and it's a great book. It goes into essentially why modern life is so stressful. It's because we're activating that fight or flight cortisol hormone when we don't need to. Okay, so back in a couple hundred years ago, when people were actually less stressed out and had much less, it's because they were not overstimulated. They had plenty of time to rest, plenty of downtime, plenty of simplicity. Yes, life was tough, life was hard, but people also had better ways of coping with stress, and life was much more simple, so they were healthier in some ways. So modern life, it tends to be something that causes a chronic level of cortisol, a chronic level of overstimulation. We call that the fight or flight hormone. We call cortisol the fight or flight hormone. If it's boosted for too long, your body never has time to recover because we're revved up for too long. You have two different types of nervous systems in your body, okay? And these two work together. One speeds everything up, one slows everything down. Speed up, slow down. And they work together. You need both. But when you're stressed out all the time, you speed up all the time, you get that thermostat out of whack, you never have time to rest, time to recover. So too much cortisol, too much stimulation of what we call the sympathetic nervous system, you never have time to relax. So what do we have to do? We have to go back to the 3 rules of stress management. Number 1, do things that are good for you, good for other people, good for the community, okay? And those things tie in very well with avoiding negative stress and doing things to build up resiliency, which are the next 2 rules. So let me give you some ideas on things you can work on, okay? So there are tons of things you can do. I actually have a few favorites that are favorites of mine. You may have other things. I'll just rattle off a few ideas that I have, and I've got a whole list. I'll post these in the show notes. But things like relaxing music, classical music, jazz, relaxing music. Not, there's a time for that kind of music, but that type of music boosts cortisol. It boosts the stress hormone. It can be good for short bursts of energy, but when you want to relax, listen to relaxing music, okay? What about aromatherapy? What about essential oils and candles, things like that, things that smell good? There's science backing that up. What about being outside in nature? That's a great one. Taking a walk, exercise. I wrote a book about the effect of exercise on the brain and mental health. Exercise is huge because it helps you build up brain muscle, essentially. It helps boost those neurotransmitters, those natural drugs in your brain that make you feel good. So it will help your memory. It will help your ability to deal with stress. It will boost all the positive hormones like growth hormone, testosterone, estrogen, GABA, particularly things like stretching. Stretching is very, very good for stress relief. Breathing. If you only do one technique, breathing is probably the most important thing. And we'll do another video where we go over breathing. But just quite simply, you need to learn for relaxation to breathe with your belly. Breathe down here in your diaphragm, okay? See, that relaxes me already. I can already feel my blood pressure lowering. I can feel even just more blood flow. So breathing is huge because breathing is both unconscious. You have to breathe to stay alive, but it's conscious too. So it's one of the few things that the human body does that's both conscious and unconscious. So it can really help you with stress and anxiety. It's probably the single most important thing. What are some other things? For a religious person, giving your stress and your cares to God is a very powerful thing. Prayer. You don't want to use God as a stress management technique, but it's true. People that have a religious life are much healthier for that reason. And I would count myself amongst those people. You know, when you have cares, when you have things on your mind, take it to the man upstairs. What about meditation? Just getting your mind focused on something other than your worries, other than your stress. Meditation is not as complicated as people make it out to be. Yes, in some traditions you have things like Zen meditation, Buddhist meditation, tantric meditation, things like that. But you can actually do things like play a sport or play guitar. And this actually gets over into hobbies, things that take your mind off of your worries, off of your stress, which is another stress management technique to help you build up resiliency and things that are good for you, good for your community. But they're also meditative, okay? They're meditative in the sense that they teach you to learn to focus, okay? Learn to focus. Now, I actually just had a jiu-jitsu class tonight, and in the class, I was not worried about, the 20 appointments that I have over the next couple of days. I wasn't worried about a speech I have to give or a book I'm trying to publish or personal life issues. I wasn't worried about that. I was focused on jiu-jitsu in the class. And that's the benefit of getting your mind off of whatever it is that's stressing you out, okay? And when you learn new things and you have those social connections, you're out there living, you're naturally building up the ability to cope with stress, which was one of our main 3 rules, right? Let's go over the rules again. Do things that are good for you, good for other people, good for the community. That's number 1. Avoid negative stress, number 2. Number 3, build up stress resiliency. And these techniques, breathing, music, aromatherapy, nature, having a pet, I didn't mention that, exercise, meditation, prayer, these things are very, very good to help you build up resiliency to stress. Sleep, you have to get 7-8 hours of sleep. What about eating well? Eating well is good because it helps your brain be healthier. And to be able to process the modern world, you need your brain to be very, very healthy. What about things like taking a technology break? That's powerful. Turn the devices off. Research now shows that young people who use social media a lot have higher rates of depression, higher rates of anxiety. Last but not least, there are many ways to deal with stress. I'll put this in the show notes. But probably the single most important thing is to have a social network in place that will give you both a sense of joy in life, a sense of purpose and meaning, friendships, camaraderie, community. But also when times are tough, you'll have that friend you can call. You'll have someone that you can talk to. And we have the most people ever in the United States living alone. So we have a huge problem in Western society with social isolation. I'll talk about that a lot because it's a big problem. If you go back and look at some of the other videos I did about the blue zones, you'll see that I really like to emphasize that because I know it's something that we've lost. So you don't ever want to get to that feeling or to that place where you're out of control, particularly if you have responsibility and no control. Okay, so you want to get organized, get your life in order, do things that are good for you, get out of debt, get some goals in your life, have some structure, have some good, healthy habits in place to help you deal with stress. Unplug, learn to breathe, get outside, be active, be healthy. The list goes on, but live a healthy life, have a healthy lifestyle, and you'll deal with stress in a healthy way. ScottGodwin.net and movementandmeaning.com. Come check out my website, my books, and let me know what you think. I'll talk to you soon.